We are still here at the Ecotourism Sustainable Forum 2024, and today is day 2, and the conversations are still ongoing. And right now, we are joined by a representative from the UNEP, and he's going to introduce himself and tell us who he is and what his role is at the Ecotourism Forum. So, karibu sana.
Thank you very much,
Yeah. So we
Wanjera.
have 2 cameras. So we have this, but you don't need to look at us. That is your camera.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you, Wanjera. Thanks for having me here.
Mm-hmm.
So my name is David Rubia. I work for the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP.
Mm-hmm.
I work in their regional office for Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do there is help scale up the implementation of SDG 12, which is responsible consumption production. So essentially how we can be able to get our businesses to produce sustainably, but also our consumers to demand or to consume sustainably. I mean, not to demand, but to be more aware about how their choices impact the sustainability of production. Now, this is a very broad topic, and so we work in high priority sectors, and tourism, or should I say sustainable tourism, is a very, very key sector for many countries in Africa. It's a very high earner for foreign exchange and also for a big economic driver. But more importantly, two things: it's very, very connected to other sectors. It's very hard to decouple tourism from other sectors. And then secondly, it was very affected by COVID. It was one of the most affected sectors that actually shut down. So we need to have a green recovery in tourism, and that's why I'm here at the Ecotourism Kenya Sustainable Tourism Forum.
Absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
And I love that. But what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, especially African countries, in accelerating that shift into sustainable tourism? Because it's not a foreign concept.
No, I like to say it as a proud African that,
Yeah.
that our cultures were sustainable and were circular.
Yeah.
In the inception, and we transitioned unfortunately to linear models of production where we extract resources, manufacture, use waste due to the economics of the time. But yeah, we're by culture very, very sustainable. Now the challenges of transitioning back to that
Yeah.
are manifold. We need a mindset shift. First of all, as individuals, each one of us needs to waken to the fact that every single thing that we're doing has an impact on what we call the environmental triple planetary crisis: climate change, pollution, and nature loss. So everything that we do, me and you sitting here, what we're wearing, what we consume, it has an impact. So if we wake up one day and we realize that what the choices we make have that impact, that's the first thing that needs to happen. Now, that's probably what you would call from the ground up. But we also need the right frameworks in place. We need the right policy frameworks. But I think there's a bit of exhaustion in Africa talking about policies because we have nice policies. We have fantastic policy documents, perhaps the best in the world, but we don't have policy implementation. So there is an implementation gap. So that's the second big problem, I'd say, is implementation. But yes, there are, and this is the quick one that people go to, is finance, that there is limited funding for sustainability. I counter it by saying, if we in the development space and also we in business are able to articulate business cases of sustainability, like meaning why would you want to invest in renewable energy? Because there is a pocket related reason. If we're able to extract business cases, speaking to the pocket, we will see the shift. I think for now, sometimes we are always, we have a bit of a limited mindset, again, going back to the first reason of why should we be doing this? Well, if we've established the business reason, the business case, we will open up the potential. So I think for me, it's a challenge, but there is a simplicity to some of the things that we think need to happen to unlock this quagmire. It's almost like there's a simple solution that's difficult to implement. Maybe if there's a way of articulating it that way.
But when you talk about sustainability,
Yes.
sustainability is so easy.
It's very broad. Some people say, "What's sustainability?" People say green. Some people say sustainable. Some people, all these buzzwords, right? But in essence, it is making use of our natural resources in a way that does not limit the future generations to have the same access to the same resources. Without impacting climate, without increasing pollution, or should I say, while decreasing pollution, and also while minimizing the creation of waste, because that's related to pollution. So when we talk about circular economy, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
But then also not impacting nature, not ensuring that we do not see to a diminishing of our ecosystems and our rich biodiversity. So that's the challenge. That's what sustainability is for me. It's simply saying that what can we do better with that the little that we have. There's many things in there. There's being efficient with our resources. There's minimizing waste creation. There's so many things within sustainability. But like you said, it's easy.
Yeah.
When I say being sustainable, you get it. You don't need the whole definition.
Yeah, you don't need the whole definition.
Yeah.
But I feel like awareness and education really plays a huge role in mindset change.
Of course.
Yeah?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I even sometimes say it's not, you're right, it's education and awareness, and the two sometimes are confused because sometimes we have the knowledge, we're just not aware.
Yeah.
Sometimes we actually know that throwing out the plastic bottle doesn't make sense from a car. You know what I mean? But then the awareness of that is what's causing the 20 million tons of waste, plastic waste, annually generated in Africa. So if you say, oh, every single one throwing out one bottle, that's what, because it's easy to be like, well, it's just a bottle. It's just, it's got, and somebody will pick it up. Who is going to pick it up? That's the awareness,
But actually, who is going to do that?
Who's going to do that? And if they're going to pick it up, why can't you give it to them instead of throwing it out, Why can't you put it in a system, But then there's also why does it have to exist? Why do I have to consume in a plastic bottle, Because that's now the issue of production, But you're right. Education, awareness, very important. And right from infancy. So I think how are we raising our children in our homes? Are we teaching them to not waste, to reuse? These are such fundamentals that we should be doing. It's not just about ethics.
Yeah.
We should be raising our children to be responsible consumers and demanding responsibility in consuming. So I think that's very important what you touched on.
I love the fact that you talked about implementation being, yes, we know, but laws and rules are not implemented in a way that I feel like political goodwill should also be something that plays part in implementation. Remember the Mishuki rules?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Like, we need seatbelts in all vehicles, vehicles, and it was effective.
It was done, yes. So it's multi-layered.
Yeah.
So we need the right political goodwill, and I'm not saying that there isn't, but I'm just saying we definitely need it. If we're speaking like we're in a vacuum, we need political goodwill. But sometimes we paint this government like it's a being out there, and that we are here, and that we are delinked. We're one and the same, in the sense that we as people at the end of the day are where the rubber meets the road. So with the example you gave of the Mishuki rules, there was an ownership from the ground that, first of all, an understanding about what a seatbelt does for you, and that education and awareness. I'm going to touch on things you've been saying.
Yeah.
So there was that led to ownership. Like, you know what? Now I don't need to think about it, and I get into the car, I put on my belt. When you go into the public transport, you're like, where is the belt? I'm not getting in. There was accountability. If you didn't have it, you personally were accountable.
Yeah.
And when there's accountability, you're like, okay, well, you know what? I may not buy into it, but I don't want to be fined or detained, right? So there's accountability. So when you talk about political buy-in, there is so many other things that also come with it: the implementation, the ownership, the being held to account. But yeah, so I think we need to hold people to account for sustainability, is what you're saying. I think that's where you're going with that.
Yes. Maybe you can do a little shift and just talk about carbon markets.
Okay.
And your role as UNEP.
So
ama hiyo tunakurusha chini ya maji.
Well, yes, in the sense that I'm by no means a carbon markets
expert
at all. But what I'd say is that I think there is a need to talk about two different things, related, but let's put them side by side. There's the issue of offsetting our emissions as individuals, as businesses, as communities. What do I mean? If I don't know, you probably have a car. You probably have an internal combustion engine car. If we are made aware of how much CO2 that as individuals we're contributing to, and somebody comes and tells you every so long you're emitting 2 tons of CO2, and you're like, wow, that's big. What can I do about that? Well, there's mitigation. You can say, I'm going to drive less. I'm going to drive a more fuel efficient car. I'm going to drive an electric car.
Yeah.
I'm going to do many other things. I'm going to take public transport. That's
Yeah.
always there, right?
Yeah.
That's mitigation. But then there's also, how can I offset that 2000? How can I go into things that are offsetting the fact that I'm emitting? And it's not that you do nothing and offset, but you try and reduce, but also offset. So what does tree planting do for me? What can I do to reduce emissions in other aspects of my life to offset the fact that I cannot, perhaps I live far away where there's no public transport, so I have to drive. Can we carpool? But then at the same time, somewhere else, I know there's an opportunity to reduce emissions in other aspects of our lives. Now think about that as an individual, think about that as a business, think about that as a community, and there's opportunities there. Now, when it comes to markets, that's where I'm even less of an expert, but I would say that there is a very important role that markets could play. There's an opportunity to create livelihoods out of the surplus or sinks, carbon sinks, people who, or countries or communities that are net sinks and not emitters. So there's an opportunity to benefit from that, right? My take is that, one, we need to inform ourselves very, very, very well on the science of it. It's a very complex science.
Yeah.
The verification is complex. When I say complex, I don't mean that impossible. I mean that it's an intricate science.
Yeah.
So we need to be sure that we're doing the right science, that we're not doing funny math. Because there's a lot of people doing funny math
Oh, yeah,
and double
greenwashing is
counting.
real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to be sure that we're doing the right math. We need to be sure that we're doing it at the right scale. So many of us as individuals are not going to be, let me not say profiting, but making big livelihoods out of selling credits. But perhaps we can come together as communities if we're living in areas where we are growing our tree cover, if we're mitigating our emissions well enough and it's being documented, there are opportunities,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and I think for me the big message I'd say is, when it comes to climate, is that there's no silver bullet. We need to look at opportunities across every single aspect of our lives, aspect of our value chains, and not look for just that one magic bullet.
Yeah.
Like, so Kenya is just going to plant trees and that's it.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to happen. And Kenya is just going to do renewable power.
Yeah.
That's not enough. We need to look everywhere. What are we doing with our food waste? What are we doing with our food loss? So for me, the issue of carbon markets, it's a tool in the toolbox. It's an important tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
It's a scientific quagmire for many, and it needs to be very, very, very well regulated and well implemented, so that it's not seen as another get rich quick scheme. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as a country, we also need to be very, very clear in understanding, not just as a country, but as countries, about when we sell our credits, what does it mean for us
Yeah. Because
as we develop.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
somebody who was complaining and he was saying,